Reality check. Right now, the median age of church attendees in the UK is in the 70s. The median age of the general population, around 40. This means there's an entire generation that's missing from the church. So who exactly is missing? It's mostly the millennials, those born between 1981 and 1996, and Gen Z or Gen Z, born between 1997 and 2012. Millennials were the first generation to grow up in a world where church was no longer a social expectation. Many were raised in Christian homes but left as young adults, often citing hypocrisy, irrelevance, or simply being too busy. Gen Z, on the other hand, is the first generation raised in a post-Christian culture. They weren't just exposed to secularism, they were shaped by it. Yet interestingly, they're not fully abandoning spirituality. Many still believe in God or a higher power, but reject organized religion, preferring to identify as spiritual but not religious, spiritual but unchurched. And then there's the gender gap. Far more women attend church than men. Only about 11% of men in the UK go to church regularly, compared to 19% of women. That's nearly double. So what's happening? Why are younger generations and men walking away? And more importantly, what can the church do about it? This isn't just a statistic, it's personal. My own son, who grew up in a church, believes in God and doesn't question the faith, doesn't attend church anymore. He's not hostile to Christianity. He just doesn't see the need for church, and he's not alone. I've also got several close friends who pray, read their Bibles, and enjoy their faith, but no longer go to church either. They still believe, they still connect with God, but for them, church attendance has become optional. This kind of reminds me of Acts 17, where Paul stood in Athens, surrounded by altars to unknown gods. He didn't dismiss their search for meaning. He engaged with it. Maybe that's what we need to do. So let's talk about this missing generation, the absent man, and how church can reconnect with those who still believe in God, but don't see the need to walk into a church building.
So the missing generations, why the young adults aren't in church. Let's be honest, everything around young people today screams modern, fast, and engaging. The world is digital, it's on demand, and it's interactive. If something doesn't interest them, they swipe. Meanwhile, church often feels stuck. They walk into a service that looks and sounds like it's from another era. The music is unfamiliar, the traditions feel irrelevant, and the sermon is about Leviticus and the temple furniture. Meanwhile, the real-life struggles, relationships, career, anxiety, social justice, identity aren't being addressed in a way that connects. Is it any wonder that they're checking out? Paul said in 1 Corinthians 9:22, I have become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. The gospel doesn't change, but how we engage people should. Now I've got 4 reasons why I think they are leaving a mess. They are tech savvy, but church is lagging behind. Young adults are born into the information age. They have instant access to knowledge, and they know when something is outdated, inauthentic, or just plain bad. If they have a question about faith, suffering, sexuality, or purpose, they won't wait until Sunday for a sermon. They'll Google it. And if what they find online seems more thoughtful and engaging than what they hear in church, guess where they'll go for answers? Meanwhile, church still relies on methods that worked decades ago. Many services are passive. Sit, listen, leave. While the world they live in is interactive, why do they need to sit through a sermon when TikTok can explain something in 30 seconds? The challenge isn't that the young people don't care, it's that they aren't engaged. And if the church doesn't speak their language, the world will. Proverbs 11:30 says, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who wins souls is wise. Wisdom isn't just about having the truth, it's knowing how to present it in a way that reaches people. Now the second bit is that they're spiritual but not religious. Many millennials and Gen Z still believe in a higher power. They're just not convinced that they need a church. Instead, they turn to meditation and mindfulness for peace, social media and influencers for advice, astrology and the universe for meaning. Why? Because these things feel more personal, accessible, and non-judgmental. That young generation want authenticity, not rituals, community, not formality, meaning and not meetings. But here's the problem. Christianity was never meant to be a solo journey. Hebrews 10:25 says, do not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. The church isn't just a building, it's a body, and a disconnected limb doesn't last long. We have to show them that faith isn't about tradition or rules, it's about a living, breathing relationship with God. Third point, they have trust issues with the church. Let's be real, the church hasn't always done itself favors. You've got scandals and hypocrisy, leaders falling from grace, churches that feel more like businesses than places of worship. And we wonder why young people are skeptical. Jesus said in Matthew 5:16, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The problem is that many haven't seen the light. They've seen the scandals, the greed, and the past struggles. You know what one of the solutions is? Radical transparency. own our past failures, show real change, lead with humility. The early church in Acts 2 didn't win people over with perfect sermons or impressive buildings. They lived out their faith together, authentically in real community. If today's church wants to regain trust, it can't just preach change, it has to live it. Now, my fourth point is this: they are raised in a culture that undermines faith. Let's not ignore the elephant in the room. Political correctness has kicked God out of the classroom. Schools teach evolution and humanism as fact, but treat faith as an opinion. Christianity is often seen as narrow-minded and outdated. Sexuality, gender identity, and morality are taught from a secular worldview, with no room for faith-based perspectives. Young people are growing up with a value system that often directly contradicts biblical teaching. So when they face real-life conflicts about relationships, abstinence, identity, or gender, they're caught in the middle. Society says one thing, faith says another. Who do they trust? And if we don't give them honest, thoughtful answers, they will assume we don't have any. 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do it with gentleness and respect. The problem isn't always that young people reject faith. It's that they've never heard it explained in a way that makes sense. So what's the answer? The church doesn't need to be cool. It doesn't need gimmicks. It needs to be real. Engage with culture, but don't compromise truth. Answer hard questions instead of avoiding them. Create real community, not just events. Live out faith authentically, because they can sport a fake a mile away. Proverbs 4:7 says, and I love this verse, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. The gospel isn't outdated, but if we don't show them why it matters to their world today, they'll assume it is. And that's on us. And where are the men? This is a real question. And if you've ever looked around in most churches, you'll notice the same thing. Women far outnumber men in attendance, in leadership, and in participation. Now, let me make it clear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with women leading, serving, and thriving in the church. Women have been vital to the mission of the gospel from the very beginning. But the absence of men is undeniable. And it's not just about numbers. It's about engagement. Men aren't just missing from the pews, they're missing from the conversations, the spiritual development of their families, and the deep bonds of koinonia, the real fellowship that builds strong godly men. So what's happened? Why have the men either left the church or never really felt they belonged in the first place? So what's the problem? Why are men disengaged? For starters, church has often been unintentionally feminized. It emphasizes emotions, sitting still, quiet reflection, and passive listening. And let's be honest, most men don't connect with that. That's not how men naturally build bonds or grow. Look at Jesus. He didn't gather men into a quiet circle to hold hands and softly sing Kumbaya. He walked up to rough Calaos fishermen and said, "Follow me." No explanations, no emotional appeal, just the challenge. And they followed, because that's what men do when they see a mission worth giving their lives to. Jesus wasn't passive. He flipped tables in the temple. He spoke truth boldly before rulers. He stood firm against religious corruption. He called out hypocrisy with the kind of courage most men respect. But men don't want to be nice. They want to be good. They don't want to be tame. They want to be strong. They don't want to be soft. They want to be wise. They want to be warriors for something that really matters. That's why men crave depth, intellectualism, and sound theology. They want teaching that challenges them, wisdom that sharpens them, truth that strengthens them. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. But if church feels more like a dull plastic rubbing against itself, what's the sharpening? So let's talk about what men actually wrestle with, the things that keep them up at night. Careers and financial struggles. Men are designed for work. Look at Genesis chapter 3. Yet many struggle with job security, career pressure, debt, and financial uncertainty. Men struggle with lust, a massive epidemic, yet rarely talked about in depth in church. Still marriages and struggling relationships. How does a man fight for his wife when he feels distant? Health and discipline. Many men are overweight, exhausted, stressed out, and struggling physically. Raising children in a corrupt culture. How does a man lead his family when his children are drifting from God? Personal failures. Men live in quiet shame over their past mistakes. But what do they hear on Sunday? Sermons about the rapture and how everything is getting worse, but hold on because Jesus is coming soon. Or abstract theology with no real world application. Meanwhile, men are drowning in real battles and no one is throwing them a lifeline. Now here's the problem. If the church won't answer these questions, someone else will. And that's exactly what happened. Enter Kevin Samuels, Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson. These men rose to prominence because they did something the church stopped doing. They spoke directly to men. They talked about why men feel disrespected in relationships. They addressed the struggles of men who feel invisible in society. They challenged men to take responsibility, improve themselves, and strive for greatness. And men listened. Now let's be clear, these men were not biblical role models. Many of their teachings are misogynistic, arrogant, self-centered, and toxic. But why do they have such influence? Because they're scratching an itch the church has ignored. If men felt challenged, equipped, and sharpened in the church, they would be turning to social media gurus for wisdom. Instead of teaching men to overcome, many churches teach spiritual escapism. Men don't need more sermons on the end times on why we should just wait for Jesus to return. More sentimental messages about being kind and nice. More soft encouragement without any practical action. Men need a mission. They need a faith that makes them stronger. They need biblical strategies for winning at work and building wealth wisely. Honest discussions about sexual temptations and how to overcome it. Tools for fighting for their marriages instead of giving up. A plan for getting physically strong and healthy. Guidance on leading their families in an anti-God culture. And a brotherhood that pushes them towards greatness. And if the church doesn't step up and start meeting men where they are, then toxic influences will continue to disciple them instead. So what's the solution? The good news? It's not too late. The churches and movements that are doing that right. They're preaching strong biblical truth that challenges and equips men, calling men to mission instead of just sitting in the pews, creating spaces for men to sharpen each other, accountability, discipleship, and real talk. Engaging the minds of men with depth, apologetics, and theology that doesn't insult their intelligence. Teaching men to fight for their families, for their health, their careers, and spiritual lives instead of just waiting for heaven. Because if we want to see men return to the church, we have to give them a reason to come back. Not a feel-good experience, not a sentimental message, not another escape, but a real fight worth engaging in. And that's the only way we'll turn this tide. And that's what we'll discuss next. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hopefully you'll join me in the next one where I look at solutions for this issue. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.